In 2005, a silent contract was signed in the shadows of Buckingham Palace. In exchange for stepping into the royal fold, a woman had to sign away the ultimate prize, the title of Queen. But in the United Kingdom, promises written on paper are often burned the moment the keeper of the seal breathes her last. Queen Elizabeth knew this. And what she did 17 years later was not about protecting a mere title. She was protecting an empire. Look back at the wedding day of 2005. There was no grand spectacle, no glittering state jewels, no crown. The streets did not roar with the usual deafening cheers of a royal celebration. Instead, the public offered a chilling, heavy silence. The event was pushed into the quiet, restricted walls of the Windsor Guildhall, far away from the echoing grandeur of Westminster Abbey. It was an arrangement designed to shrink the moment, to contain it. The Queen did not attend the civil ceremony. Her absence was not an oversight. It was a physical manifestation of a strict boundary being drawn. The conflict did not begin with a loud argument. It began with a piece of paper, a press release issued by Clarence House and broadcast by the British Broadcasting Corporation. It was a small statement, easily overlooked by those distracted by the wedding bells, but it carried the force of a royal decree. It declared that upon her husband's accession, the new bride would not be known as Queen. Instead, she would hold the title of Her Royal Highness, the Princess Consort. In the drawing rooms of the palace, decisions like this were never debated openly. They were finalised in hushed tones behind closed oak doors where the air grows thin and the pressure becomes immense. Imagine the private study. The Queen stood behind her desk, perfectly still. She controlled the space entirely by remaining on her feet, forcing anyone who entered to recognise the hierarchy of the room. Her son stood before her, trying to maintain a facade of absolute calm. He suggested quietly that the public might eventually accept his wife as Queen once the dust settled. The Queen let the silence stretch, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. A silence so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on his shoulders. She did not frown. She simply looked at a silver-framed photograph on her desk, then back to him. She asked, in a tone devoid of anger but full of quiet judgment, if he truly believed the nation had forgotten the mother of his 2 boys. He swallowed hard. His hand instinctively brushed the edge of his suit jacket. He looked down at the carpet, murmuring that he only wished for his wife to have the respect she inherently deserved. The Queen's gaze did not waver. She noted his hesitation, the slight shifting of his weight. She told him that respect is earned through duty, not handed over through a convenient change of vocabulary. There was no room for further negotiation. She had already decided. The title of Princess Consort was not a display of humility. It was an iron collar, carefully forged by the monarch to ensure the survival of the institution. It was a protocol designed to pacify a grieving public. To understand the severity of this, one must look at the bedrock of British constitutional tradition. By common law, the wife of a reigning king is automatically the Queen Consort. There had never been a Princess Consort in the history of the British monarchy. Creating a lesser title was entirely unprecedented. It was a glaring structural anomaly. This linguistic demotion was a direct response to a ghost that still walked the corridors of the palaces. The shadow of Diana was too vast, too deeply rooted in the hearts of the people, to allow another woman to seamlessly take her crown. The Queen knew that placing the highest title on this particular woman's head in 2005 would be a fatal miscalculation. It would shatter the fragile peace she had spent decades holding together. Before we dive deeper into how this delicate agreement quietly unraveled behind closed doors, take a second to subscribe and like the video. And tell me in the comments below, do you believe stripping away the title of Queen on her wedding day was a necessary humiliation to protect the monarchy, or was it simply the fair price she had to pay to enter the family? Think about it carefully. Your answer might change entirely when you see what happens next. 16 years had passed. People may forget, but statues do not. A block of white marble in the heart of London shattered the perfect plan of those quietly waiting for the throne. It was July 2021. The sunken garden at Kensington Palace. William and Harry stood side by side, their differences temporarily shelved. Together, they pulled back a heavy green cloth. The white marble of Princess Diana was revealed. The camera lenses zoomed in on the statue's eyes. Unmoving. Permanent. According to reports from the Associated Press, this was never just a memorial. It was a boundary drawn in stone. It was a sharp, cold reminder from two princes to their father. The mother they lost had never truly vacated her space. Her shadow was not fading. It was simply waiting, ready to cast a long, dark veil over the future his new wife was attempting to build. Across the city, Clarence House felt the shift in temperature. The air felt the pressure. The Queen was seen using a walking stick. Her health was quietly failing. Time was a shrinking commodity. The heirs team began to move. Small, calculated leaks reached the press. Whispers in the Sunday papers. They were testing the waters. They were measuring the public's reaction to a single, highly guarded word, Queen. Not Princess Consort, just Queen. They were calculating a dangerous move, preparing to erase the 2005 protocol the moment the sovereign closed her eyes. But the Queen observed the anomaly. Through her network within the palace walls, she recognized the quiet rebellion. She summoned her son to her private sitting room. She stood by the window. He entered and remained standing near the heavy oak door. On the small silver table between them rested a folded newspaper. "They are testing the word," she said. He stopped. Just for a fraction of a second, his hand brushed his cuff. "The public needs to be prepared," he said. "Prepared for what you promised would not happen?" she asked. He did not answer. He knew she already had the internal reports. The question was a trap. A long silence filled the room. The grandfather clock ticked. 10 seconds. 15. The air turned remarkably thin. It was a heavy, suffocating pause. "The boys unveiled the marble yesterday," she said. He looked down at the carpet. It was a beautiful tribute. "It was a boundary," she corrected him. Her voice was flat. "One you are attempting to cross." He looked up. The 2005 arrangement was temporary. The context has changed. It is a matter of securing the structure of the monarchy. She turned from the window. "The protocol remains exactly where I placed it." He adjusted his tie. A micro-expression of lost control. "It is simply not convenient for the future." Convenient. The word landed like a stone on a glass table. She did not raise her voice. There was no anger. That made it worse. "You believe her memory can be handled with a press release?" He said nothing. He understood the danger of arguing. She stepped toward the table, her eyes locked on his. "The institution is not a draft you can edit when I am no longer looking." The line was drawn. She sat. He did not. The conversation was over. But the war for the title had just entered its most ruthless phase. You do not overthrow a monarch with weapons. You overthrow them by quietly editing a single word in a press release draft. But unfortunately for those waiting in the wings, Queen Elizabeth was the most meticulous reader of drafts the 20th century had ever produced. January 2022. The winter air around Sandringham House was biting. Inside, the private study was suffocatingly quiet. A fire burned in the grate, but the room felt entirely cold. The Queen sat alone at her desk. Before her lay a stack of thick cream-coloured paper. These were internal reports, the heavily guarded blueprints for the inevitable transition of power. According to political analysts at the Times, a subtle manoeuvre was buried within these pages. Draft coronation scripts had been submitted by his team. The Queen's finger slowly traced the lines of text. She stopped. There was a glaring blank space. The title of Princess Consort was entirely missing from the future ceremonial order. It was not a clerical error. It was a calculated omission designed to create an accomplished fact. A silent usurpation. The Queen did not summon a shouting council. She did not draft an angry letter. Royal fury is never loud. It is absolute paralyzing silence. She knew exactly what this blank space meant. If she allowed him to dictate this specific detail after she was gone, the younger prince would resist. The public would riot. The institution would crack under the weight of an unresolved history. She requested his presence. He entered the study. He stood tall, but his eyes immediately flicked to the cream-coloured papers resting under her hand. "The drafts arrived," she said. Her voice was perfectly even. "They are preliminary," he replied. He clasped his hands behind his back. She placed a single finger on the paper. "They are incomplete." Silence fell over the room. The only sound was the sharp crackle of the fireplace. 5 seconds. 10. He shifted his weight just a fraction of an inch. A microscopic tell. He was on the defensive. The ceremonial team felt it was best to leave room for the context of the day, he said softly. Context. She repeated the word. It was a condemnation, cold and absolute. She did not ask why the title was missing. She already knew the answer. The question was merely a mechanism to corner him. "You believe. Leaving a space blank removes the boundary we established." He looked at the fire, avoiding her gaze. "It is a matter of protocol evolving." "Protocol does not evolve in the shadows," she said. He closed his eyes. For a split second, a silent realization that his maneuver had failed. She looked down at the draft. The matter had to be handled, not debated. If she left this unresolved, it would tear the fabric of the family apart. She had to take the choice away from him entirely. The 2005 arrangement would be discarded. She would remove the old collar, but she would forge a new chain. One that was far heavier. One that carried the permanent weight of her authority, placed exactly where it could never be quietly removed. "I will address the drafts," she said. "How?" he asked. The word slipped out, exposing his sudden lack of control. She did not look up. "It is handled. You are dismissed." How do you punish someone quietly desperate for status? You do not lock them away. You hand them exactly what they desire, but you ensure they must kneel to receive it directly from your hand. February the 5th, 2022. The eve of Accession Day. The air at Sandringham House was frigid and completely still. At a highly coordinated hour, a formal message was released to the world. It instantly flooded the global data feeds of Reuters and Bloomberg. It was merely a single document, yet it carried the undeniable, crushing force of an entire institution. The Queen did not argue with the press. She did not debate with her heir. She simply dictated history. The statement contained a meticulously crafted sentence. "It is my sincere wish that, when that time comes, Camilla will be known as Queen Consort." Look closely at the architecture of those words. Sincere wish. This is the ultimate institutional weapon. It is not a constitutional law that a government can amend. It is a deeply personal final directive from a sovereign celebrating 70 years of unyielding service. To oppose a sincere wish is to publicly defy a beloved monarch in the twilight of her reign. The public would never forgive it. By utilizing this exact phrase, she trapped them entirely within her own benevolence. Then, she addressed the title itself. She granted the highly coveted word Queen, but she violently anchored it to Consort. She hammered the boundary directly into the historical record. The quiet strategy, the convenient plan to eventually transition to a solitary queen, was completely neutralized. The dangerous blank space in their drafts was filled by her absolute authority. Imagine the private meeting that followed the broadcast. The drawing room. The Queen sat in her usual chair by the fireplace. The heir and his wife stood across from her. They did not sit. They were not invited to. The statement was incredibly generous, the heir said. His fingers brushed the edge of his jacket. A tiny, nervous fraction of an inch. "It establishes the protocol," the Queen replied. Her expression remained entirely neutral. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. The grandfather clock marked the time. The victory they had spent years planning suddenly felt remarkably like a steel cage. The silence was suffocating, pressing heavily against the walls of the room. The wife lowered her gaze to the patterned carpet. "I am profoundly grateful." The Queen looked at her, a cold, piercing evaluation. You understand the context of the wording. It was not a question, it was a final verdict. She already knew the answer. The wife's hand twitched slightly by her side. She maintained her composure, but the defense was visibly broken. "Yes, ma'am." "Then the matter is handled," the Queen said. She looked away, turning her attention back to the burning fire. They were dismissed without another word. They walked out of the room, holding the exact prize they had spent decades seeking. Yet, they had been completely outmaneuvered. The title was not an inherent right they could naturally claim. It was a public donation from the sovereign. They were forced to wear it with eternal, visible gratitude. The Queen did not just secure a peaceful transition. She permanently sealed their ambition beneath the immense weight of her own legacy. What do you think is the most powerful move in this interaction? Tell me in the comments. When a silent explosive detonates, only those standing within the immediate blast radius feel the shockwave. The morning of February the 6th, 2022, the United Kingdom celebrated. The newspapers printed headlines of unity and grace. But deep inside the stone corridors of the palace, a heavy steel boundary had just crashed down. The younger generation understood the shift immediately. According to reports from the Associated Press, both William and Harry offered no public statements. They maintained absolute, unbroken silence. But in this family, silence is never a void. It is a highly calibrated response. They did not protest. They did not leak grievances to the press. The matter was handled. The Queen had orchestrated the peace by securing the perimeter around their mother's memory. The title of Queen Consort ensured that the ghost of Diana was not entirely overwritten. The ultimate boundary remained intact. Imagine the morning encounter. William stood by the mahogany table in a private sitting room. He adjusted his cuffs. A slow, deliberate movement. His father entered, stopping near the doorway. He did not cross the threshold completely. "The statement has been well received," the heir said. His voice was careful. William did not look up from the papers on the table. It is very clear. The silence stretched between them. A heavy, suffocating 15 seconds. The grandfather clock ticked. The heir's thumb rubbed the cold gold of his signet ring. A tiny, nervous tell. He was seeking a concession. "It provides stability for the future," he added softly. William finally lifted his head. His expression was entirely blank. "It provides a boundary." The room went dead silent. The father looked at the son. "She is protected," he said. William aligned the edge of the newspaper precisely with the edge of the table. "The institution is protected," he corrected. "The context is exactly where it belongs." The heir did not argue. He offered a sharp, microscopic nod. The surrender was acknowledged. The sovereign had fought their war and secured the perimeter without firing a single shot. The submission from Clarence House had to be public. It had to be complete. Within hours, they released their official response. The heir stated, "We are deeply conscious of the honour represented by my mother's wish." Deeply conscious. This is the precise vocabulary of institutional surrender. They were bound by public gratitude. There was zero leverage left. They could not inch forward. The Queen had locked the door and handed them the key in front of the entire world. To ask for a different lock would be an act of betrayal. Behind the thick palace walls, the royal communications team executed the order with brutal precision. The machinery of the monarchy does not pause for feelings. It operates on protocol. Within minutes, the internal files were altered. Briefing notes for global embassies were locked in. The phrasing was standardized across every official channel. Letterheads were prepared for the eventual transition. The system tightened its grip. Every royal aide understood the directive. There were no rogue statements, no leaked complaints, no gaps in the armor. The narrative was permanently bolted to the floor. The Queen had proven her ultimate mastery of the game. She did not argue. She simply adjusted the protocol, and the entire world fell into line. What do you think of William's silent reaction? Tell me your thoughts below. The final page of every power dossier always leaves a vacuum. When the ultimate keeper of the order closes her eyes, do those left behind honour the contract, or do they quietly tear it apart? The answer unfolded right in front of the world, yet almost no one recognised the shift. September 2022. The sovereign passed. The protocol was triggered with ruthless efficiency. Global networks fell perfectly into line. Every headline broadcast the exact phrase she had dictated: Queen Consort, the boundary held. The royal machinery operated exactly as the late monarch had programmed it. The public accepted the transition. The institution remained steady. It appeared the matter was permanently handled. But power is never static. Fast forward to April 2023, a private office deep inside the palace, a heavy mahogany desk. The new king sat in the chair his mother had occupied for 7 decades. A senior aide stood opposite him, presenting a thick, ivory-coloured parchment. It was the official coronation invitation. The king looked down at the heavy paper. He traced the embossed ink with his index finger. He stopped at a specific line. "The lettering," the king said. His voice was low, betraying nothing. "It is the final draft, Your Majesty," the aide replied. He kept his hands clasped firmly behind his back. The silence descended. 10 seconds. 20. The ticking of the ornate clock on the mantelpiece amplified the gravity of the room. The king stared at the word printed next to his wife's name: Consort. It was the iron collar forged in 2005, locked tightly into place in 2022. The king lifted his gaze. He did not ask a question. He no longer had to. The ultimate authority had shifted. "The context has evolved," the king stated. The aide offered a microscopic nod. It was not an agreement, merely an acknowledgement of a new reality. "Yes, sir." "The modifier is no longer necessary," the king added. He pushed the ivory card a fraction of an inch across the polished wood. "Remove it." The aide looked at the card, then back to the sovereign. "It will be handled just like that." The word evaporated. When the official invitations were released, scrutinized closely by global outlets like the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg, the suffix was entirely gone. Queen Camilla stood alone on the parchment, unanchored, free. The new monarch had finally reclaimed the rules of the game, quietly dismantling the boundary his mother had installed. But look closer at the board. Did the late Queen truly lose? She was a supreme political master. She understood that absolute power is not about controlling eternity. It is about controlling the most dangerous phase of a transition. By enforcing the boundary while she lived, she absorbed the public shockwave herself. She provided a critical buffer. She shielded her 2 grandsons from a sudden, brutal erasure of their mother's legacy during the monarchy's most fragile hour. She forced the entire system to obey her will exactly when it mattered most. The eventual removal of the word does not erase her victory. It validates her strategy. It was not an act of tyranny. It was the cold, heavy, and necessary cost of keeping a crown breathing across centuries.